My name is Santiago Carvajalino, and this is my place in Canadian history. My place in Canadian history started not that long ago. On February 23rd, 2003, just 3 years after I was born, my parents decided to leave everything behind and immigrate to Canada in search of a better life. There are some very interesting facts about the history of Colombian immigration to Canada. In the last countrywide census, there were 150,000 people that were of Colombian descent living in Canada. Colombians are the largest South American group to immigrate to Canada and second Latin American ethnicity behind Mexico. The 40-year Civil War is responsible for a large number of all immigrants from Colombia. Colombian refugees are the number one refugee population in Canada. My family's history started in Valledupar, Colombia, which is a major city on the coast of Colombia. It is also one of the country's biggest naval ports. Here, my grandfather, on my mother's side, was born. He grew up and obtained a degree in agriculture. Meanwhile, my grandmother was studying halfway across the country, becoming a general surgeon. In 1971, my grandfather moved to Bogota, the country's capital, and met my grandmother. They soon fell in love and got married. In 1972, my mother was born, and she met my father at her first job in 1992. During this time in Colombia, the country fell into a horrible time. They were in the middle of a 40-year civil war and were on the brink of economic depression. My parents wanted a better environment and more security for us. It was time to move. The violence throughout 1995 to 2003 was overwhelming and tragic. It was a mix of cartels, guerrillas, and revolutionary organizations trying to eliminate each other. They each wanted to control the billion-dollar drug trafficking business by themselves. There were selective genocides, kidnappings, extortions, sexual abuse, torture, and forced recruitment due to this. Meanwhile, during this time economically, the economy was in turmoil and inequality was bigger than ever. From 1995 to 2000, the gross domestic product declined 12%. Around 66% of the population was under the poverty line, and 20% of the population had around 60% of the country's wealth. All these push factors led to my family wanting to immigrate. The question then became, where to? First, my parents thought of the U.S. At that time, it was one of the world's best economies, and many Colombians usually immigrate there. My parents traveled to Florida to gain more information on the process. They soon realized that it was very expensive and could take up to 10 years. There's also no guarantee that after spending all that money, they would be allowed. Due to this, my parents ruled the U.S. out and decided to focus on their application to Canada. Leaving Colombia for a first world country was their main objective. The process in immigrating to Canada was a huge challenge for my family. This was due to two events, the war on drugs and 9/11. The war on drugs was started in 1971 by U.S. President Richard Nixon, where he declared that stopping the abuse of illegal substances was priority number one. He set up the UN Single Convention on Drug and Illegal Substances, which is a treaty formed to eliminate illegal drugs in countries like Canada and the U.S. Canada immediately joined this treaty. Countries like the U.S. and Canada spent up to $500 million a year on eliminating drugs just on Colombia, helping to eliminate some of the organizations that produced and trafficked these drugs. This included military presence, mass raids on my country's civilian areas, and mountain raids. This made it harder for Colombians to immigrate to Canada and the U.S. because they feared some would abuse the process and come to the country to try and traffic drugs. This led to the discrimination of Colombians and a more thorough inspection before they gave you immigration visas. Also, 9/11. In 2001, after 9/11, Canada's policy on immigration got much more strict. There was a concern of national security because they feared by letting anyone in their country that would expose themselves to a terrorist attack like the U.S. did. After overcoming this, the question then became, why come to Canada? Canada had many pull factors. The economy was very strong, there were a need for skilled workers to fill all the jobs they had available. Also, Canada's system made it easier for my family to bring other relatives over later down the road. Lastly, Canada's benefits like free education, healthcare, and a safe and secure environment were other pull factors that attracted my family. Finally, after their papers came December 2002, they were given a 3-month period to leave Colombia. On February 23, 2003, my parents and I had finally arrived to Canada. We moved into a small condo on Baby in the Royal Orchard area. What challenges did my family face when we arrived? We faced many challenges upon our arrival. Soon after we arrived, the 2003 blackout happened, where nearly all of Ontario lost power for 3 weeks. We had to visit a shelter for a heated place to sleep until they turned our power back on. Also, the summer of 2003 was the Toronto SARS outbreak. SARS is a bacterial lung disease that can lead to pneumonia or bacterial pneumonia. Nearly 25,000 Torontonians were placed under quarantine and 44 people died that summer. Coincidentally, the first case was reported on February 23, 2003, the day we arrived. The last historical event that challenged my family was the spread of mad cow disease. This really hurt the Canadian exportation business and the economy. My family at that time had found a job part-time at a factory that cut and shipped out beef. They were immediately shut down and had to stop working until they knew it was safe. After almost being infected, my parents decided to find new jobs. After surviving that and thankfully not getting infected, my parents struggled in finding jobs in the same profession in which they had worked back home. There were many jobs available, but nobody would hire them because they had to be accredited and validate their Colombian diplomas here. They quickly did that and 2 months later started looking for work. Still, nobody would hire them. Their English was not that strong and they had no Canadian experience. To change the way things are going, my parents would send 50 resumes a day and apply for all the jobs they could find. Meanwhile, to pay the bills, my dad took a job at Food Basics and my mom worked at Chapters. 8 months later, all the intensity paid off and my dad started working at Lexmark and my mom at Cadbury Canada. Finally, we had come out on the other side and we were in a very good place. Later on, they changed jobs. My mom now works for Molson Canada and my dad worked for Enbridge for 7 years and now works for Seneca. In 2005, my little brother was born and we moved once more to Thornhill, Ontario, which is where we now live. Fast forward 13 years to February 2016, my aunt on my mom's side immigrated to Canada. She and her family have lived with us for 4 months and are moving out next month. I'm excited to see what place they take in Canadian history.